Joining me now, Sports Illustrated senior writer Chris Mannix to talk some things the NBA. And Chris, let's start with LaMarcus Aldridge deciding to step away from the game. Is he a Hall of Famer in your opinion?
You know, Basketball Reference has an algorithm which estimates a player's Hall of Fame chances, and Aldridge is right at 50%. And that's kind of how he's viewed, as one of the most borderline candidates that are out there right now. Statistically, he checks a lot of the boxes. He came up just shy of 20,000 points. He would have eclipsed that if he played the rest of this season. Almost every player that has passed 20,000 points is in the Hall of Fame. He's got 5 All-NBA nods. The magic number there is 6, so he's right on that border as well. 7 All-Star appearances, a lot of big numbers statistically. But his resume lacks depth. One thing you have to remember about the Hall of Fame is that it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's not the NBA Hall of Fame. So you can get in with other qualifications, namely a elite college experience. Aldridge didn't have that. Experience with USA Basketball. Aldridge never played on an Olympic team. Deep playoff runs that eclipse regular season numbers. Aldridge didn't do that. I actually think LaMarcus Aldridge, his Hall of Fame chances were hurt by the fact that, you know, he wasn't able to compete with the Nets in these playoffs. So he wasn't going to be the star of this Brooklyn team, but he would have played a meaningful role on a team that has a chance to win a championship. So it's certainly possible that when it comes time for LaMarcus Aldridge to be assessed for the Hall of Fame, having to retire just a few months early might ultimately work against him.
Would you describe him as one of the unluckiest players in the NBA? I mean, you mentioned some of those things that are missing from his resume. It seems like he's had to start and stop a number of times, especially when he seems to have built some momentum. I mean, how would you describe the kind of career that he's had with the ups and downs that he's had?
Yeah, he has had some bad luck, namely the situation with Kawhi Leonard in San Antonio. If Leonard had been healthy during that 2017 playoff run, you can certainly make the case that the Spurs would have beaten Golden State that year and gone on to win a championship. If Leonard didn't have the falling out that he had with San Antonio and stuck around after Aldridge signed a multi-year contract with that team in 2015, he would have had deeper playoff experience. But some of it, of course, is on LaMarcus Aldridge. I mean, he had a very complicated relationship with Portland. He got there, he put up big numbers, but he was never quite comfortable with his relationships with his star teammates, first with Brandon Roy and then later with Damian Lillard. So there's been an element of bad luck to Aldridge's career, and there's also been some messes that are somewhat of his own making.
How impactful will this be for the Nets, his departure?
Well, look, he was starting and playing significant minutes for that team, so they have to be replaced. I do think the Nets have some decent depth right now at the 5 spot. Blake Griffin coming over, he can play some 5 in situations. DeAndre Jordan is still there. Nick Claxton has been a really, really good piece for this Brooklyn team. So I don't think it drops their chances of winning a championship, but he certainly will be someone they have to replace.
The Celtics this season have been remarkably inconsistent at times and marred with injuries, COVID issues, all those sorts of things. Now they seem to be on a little bit of a roll here. What is your assessment of how they've been able to turn this around as of late?
Well, I think for starters, they were having something of a crisis of confidence in the February stretch of the season where they weren't playing good basketball. There just wasn't a lot of optimism in that locker room. Guys were struggling with their roles. And I think part of it is that the talent, the demise of the talent within that team, the talent going out of the last couple of years really caught up with them. I mean, they lost Al Horford and got nothing back in return. They lost Gordon Hayward and got nothing back in return. That puts a lot of pressure on guys like Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And when they don't play out of their minds well, it becomes difficult for them to win. I think that those two guys have gotten on track. Kemba Walker being healthy has certainly helped. Marcus Smart coming back healthy has certainly helped. And I do think that ultimately, though he's been out recently, Evan Fournier is going to play a big role with this team. I mean, Evan Fournier, people can sniff at that trade deadline deal all they want. He averaged close to 20 points per game with Orlando. That's not nothing. And the Celtics got him for basically nothing. So I think this team, I don't know if I'd put them among the elite yet in the Eastern Conference, but they're certainly trending in that direction.
Yeah, it's interesting. Have we taken for granted maybe how remarkable the play of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been at key times. I mean, like you said, they have depended so heavily on performance from those two. And when they're not performing, it's so much more jarring. But maybe, we're not considering how good they've been in the wake of the departure of some of those guys.
I mean, look, those two guys are absolute stars. Jayson Tatum is one of the best scorers in the NBA, and Jaylen Brown, who often winds up in Tatum's shadow, has been improving every single year. So I think they're only going to get better, but they need help around them, and they need healthy players. Smart's been injured. Kemba's been injured at times. They need support because you can't beat Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Milwaukee with just those two guys playing at a high level.
There has been a kerfuffle, so to speak, about the NBA's play-in format. You had Mark Cuban come out publicly, criticize the play-in format, Luka Doncic, some other rumblings that maybe everybody is not on board with this. Where do you stand with this new play-in format that the NBA is going to be looking to do for the playoffs?
Well, the statements are certainly self-serving because the Mavericks, right around the 7th seed right now, if they finish 7th, they don't want to be part of a play-in tournament that could potentially knock them out of the playoffs. So you have to look at it through that lens first. I do think the play-in tournament is good for the NBA. I think long-term, though, it needs to be tweaked. The play-in tournament, it creates a level of interest in the last month of the season that you didn't see in years past. Now, at this point of a season or in the coming weeks, you'd have more teams focused on the lottery and even some tanking. Now you do have teams that are in that 10-11 range that are fighting for playoff positioning, for a chance to get into that play-in tournament. And I think that has made the game better overall. I would like to see a tweak, though, to not have 4 teams involved. Maybe you have 8 and 9 as the only teams involved. And the only way 9 can get involved is if they're within 1 or 2 games of the number 8 seed. I don't want to see a scenario pop up where the 8 seed is 6 or 7 games better than the 9 seed. At that point, the 9 seed does no business being part of a play-in tournament. The 8 teams in the conference should stand alone. But if they're within 1 or 2 games, absolutely, let's have a play-in to determine that final playoff spot. It only makes the game better. So I think it's the long way of saying it should stay, but it should be tweaked in the years to come.
So you think that Mark Cuban or some of these other teams that are hovering around that 7-8 spot make a valid point that why, when we have, performed so much better than, say, the 10th seeded team in the East or West, should they be given just as much of an opportunity to get into the playoffs? That's a valid point of contention in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the 7 seed doesn't need to be involved in a play-in. As Luka Doncic said, you have 72 games this season to decide who the top teams are in the playoffs. You don't need to have 1 or 2 more. I think the 7 seed should be excluded from that. But the 8 seed, it just makes it a little bit more fun. I mean, maybe the 8 seed is going to be ticked off that they have to go through a play-in tournament to get there. But, for the betterment of the game, to have more interest in the final weeks of the regular season, it's absolutely worth it for the NBA.
All right, Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated. Thanks for being with us as always. We appreciate it.
You got it.